Hello, Australia. It is a pleasure to be speaking to you all at the Speakeasy conference today, even if it is sadly under quite odd circumstances. My name is Patrick, and I'm a person who stammers from the UK. I promised myself I would try to use the word stutter in place of stammer throughout this talk, but I'm sorry if I fall back into old habits. This talk is co-authored by my two good friends, Sam Simpson and Chris Constantino. It's called Stuttering, Pride and Prejudice. Just like a book we co-edited together a year or so ago. You can see us all in this picture here. And the title Pride and Prejudice neatly encapsulates what this talk is going to be about. The potential pride we could take in our stutters as people who stutter, counterpoised by the prejudice and discrimination we currently often face instead. To look into this, we are going to explore the different ways society and consequently people who stutter think about stuttering. Stuttering has been historically, socially and politically defined as an abnormal way of speaking, with fluency positioned as the dominant and right way to speak. This can perhaps best be seen in the language we use around it. The definitions of stuttering we commonly see highlight its deviance and negativity. Take this example from the Stuttering Foundation in America. Stuttering is a communication disorder in which the flow of speech is broken by repetitions like this, prolongations like this, or abnormal stoppages, no sound of sounds and syllables. The words they are using are routinely negative. Stuttering is defined by what it lacks as a disorder. Speech is broken and abnormal. This frame of stuttering we so typically see in society around us is formally called the medical model of disability in academic circles. I appreciate that word disability can be particularly controversial inside of stuttering. However, I want you to hang with me here because I think the ideas it helps us to explore are really useful into understanding stuttering. The medical model is something we all need at some point in our lives when we go to hospital, for instance. It focuses on diagnosis, cure, and rehabilitation, remedying back to the healthy norms of our society when we are ill. Withers, a disability studies academic, defines the medical model as a clinical approach to disability, which focuses on the use of diagnostic tools to identify pathology and make interventions in that pathology in order to cure or minimize it. Under this framework, disability is based inside of the body. Normal is a constructed ideal. Disabled people are dependent, and our lives and our identities are tragedies in need of intervention. Stuttering is often thought about this way as a tragedy. Stuttering is diagnosed by a speech and language therapist here in the UK, or understand speech and language pathologist in the US. Then we go to therapy as children to try to cure our stutter, or as adults to rehabilitate our speech as best we can. If we were to have written a book about stuttering from this point of view, it would probably be called something like Overcoming Stuttering, A Path to Fluency. And I suspect that would have sold really well, because that is commonly how we see stuttering as something that needs to be fixed, something that needs to be righted. However, there is a different way to think about it that that comes from the disability rights movement of the 1970s and 1980s that later became formalized into the social model of disability. This puts forward the concept of disability as something that occurs on top of our impairments as a result of an ill-constructed society. Mike Oliver, the first person to really formalize this theory academically, wrote, "In our view, it is society which disables physically impaired people. This disability is something imposed on top of our impairments by the way that we are unnecessarily isolated and excluded from participation in society." The most often used analogy to explain this is about an individual in a wheelchair trying to access a building with stairs. From a medical model perspective, the problem is the individual's impairment, their inability to walk or their spinal injury which has caused that. And the fix is to provide surgery or rehabilitation to enable them to climb the stairs. However, that doesn't work for everybody. The social model proposes a different course of action that could also be helpful, and that is to look to the environment as creating the disability. In this case, the stairs are really what's causing the disability, and if we provided ramp access, then we could remove that disability and this person could easily get around their environment. The social model sees disabilities occurring when there is a mismatch between bodies and their environment, like putting square pegs into round holes. The social model has been a particularly powerful force for change for obvious physical disabilities. If we look around the world as today, we can see its effects. It encourages buildings to become more accessible, and it's enshrined disability rights into laws. However, it's not been as prominent or powerful for stuttering. I think this is for a couple of reasons. It can be tricky to apply the social model to stuttering and what's a hidden and often variable difference in speech, but it is a potentially powerful approach. It encourages to look across our society and ask how it disables people who stutter. I just want to give you one example and a few more, and one of them is voice automated telephone systems. I hate these things when you ring up a bank and you have to say something specifically to get through to someone or access a department. These can routinely disable people who stutter as they are unable to interpret our voice. Furthermore, when we look at environments around us at work, open plan offices, telephones, and these days a lot of online video conferences, these can provide further barriers to people who stutter and disable them. If we remove those, we could use the social model to find adjustments for these issues for people who stutter to enable them to communicate effectively, like using text-to-speech when needed, or allowing people space to make a private phone call rather than in front of the office environment. These would be different measures than an individual trying to fix their stammer, but they could still really help their life. However, although these are obvious examples, often the barriers to people who stutter in society are rarely so tangible and easy to identify. More often they are nebulous parts of our culture. We live in a neo-capitalist society that prizes excellence, efficiency and fluency. When we watch TV, we see politicians, broadcasters and actors that are universally speaking fluent. Stuttering is absent from our society. The way to speak is being shown as fluency. Stuttering cuts against our cultural landscape and soundscape, and consequently people who stutter often experience prejudice and discrimination for stuttering. There is a name we can put to this type of prejudice. Whilst you've probably heard of terms like racism, sexism, classism, and lookism. Ableism is not as much in our wider consciousness. Ableism is prejudice against those who do not meet the able-bodied norms of our society. Or in this case, or in Stuttering's case, the fluent voices norm. Let's take one public example of stuttering being prejudiced against, and it's quite a hot topic at the moment. That's the American presidential race. Biden is a person who stutters. His speech issues have been routinely held up as a weakness during the presidential race so far, and one of the main reasons he is unfit to be president, according to his detractors. As Trump infamously tweeted, Joe Biden got tongue-tied over the weekend when he was unable to deliver a very simple line about his decision to run for president. Get used to it, another low IQ individual. I mean, there is really a lot to unpick in that sentence. And there's a lot of stigma and prejudice there. Biden himself, interestingly, has been eager to very much put his stuttering in the past as something he used to do, a battle he has proudly won and overcome over his speech defect. Even in the positive narrative Biden has tried to portray, the subtle prejudice towards stuttering as a deviance from the norm to be corrected has still been present. This stigma of stuttering has been well researched. Indeed, the effects of stigmatization of stuttering on people who stutter can be put into several steps. First is the public stigma. That is stigma we all see and hear in the world around us. This comes in the form of stereotypes and tropes about stuttering that are common in society, particularly in TV and film, that people who stutter are weak, less confident and less able than people who are fluent. People who stutter due to being in this immersive environment often come to agree with this public stigma, with these thoughts and ideals, and they too begin to see people who stutter as weak, unconfident and less able. You can perhaps see that in the way Biden looks at his own stutter as something that he previously used to do. And then finally and crushingly in the stigma process, people who stutter can come to apply the very stereotypes to themselves and internalize them. They see themselves as weak, unconfident and less able. This is often the ultimate disabling effect of societal views on stuttering. The people who stutter come to see themselves as not good enough and hold themselves back. The avoidance behaviours we as people who stutter may use to avoid stuttering are, if understood from a social model standpoint, just an expression of the prejudice we all face from society for being people who speak differently. Zachariah Richter and Joshua St. Pierre summed up the power of this prejudice against stuttering compared to fluency in our lives nicely. Stuttering is only a problem. In fact, is only abnormal because our culture places so much value on efficiency and self-mastery. Stuttering breaks communication only because ableist notions have already decided how fast and smooth a person must speak to be heard and taken seriously. An arbitrary line has been drawn around normal speech, and that line is forcefully defended. However, thankfully, there are alternative narratives beginning to emerge around stuttering that are a little bit in counteraction to this old medical model narratives. These are countering the thin and negative narratives we see on a day-to-day basis. There is a radical conversation beginning around the concept of stuttering gain. People are beginning to explore what it means to take pride in and be positive about their stutters. Not all people agree with this, but this is something which people are starting to explore. I suppose we have to think about this movement within its societal context. We live in a world that is becoming increasingly accepting of those with difference or from minority groups. Within some disability circles, particularly autism, there has been a move towards the concept of neurodiversity. This puts forward the idea that neurological differences between brains are natural and should be valued, rather than stigmatized. They try to change the concept of impairment and reimagine it to allow more positive space for understanding differences and brain and body functioning. For example, take autism. Rather than leading to fixed interests under a medical model view, under the point of view of neurodiversity, it might bring increased attention to detail that we can all benefit from within the right context. Walker writes, the idea that there is one normal or healthy type of mind or one right style of neurocognitive function is a culturally constructed fiction, no more valid and no more conducive to a healthy society or to the overall well-being of humanity than the idea there is one normal or right ethnicity, gender or culture. Then I suppose the question becomes, why can't we think about stuttering in this way? People who stutter may have subtle changes in their brain functioning picked up on imaging and DNA that might be a little bit different, and this all leads to a disfluent communication style. But who gets to decide that that's a pathological way of speaking? Why can it not just be seen as natural human variation that should be allowed to be respected and allowed space rather than something to fix? And some people who stutter have even put forward these radical ideas of stuttering gain. Christopher Constantino talks about how stuttering introduces novelty and excitement into conversations, making them more interesting and memorable for our speaking partners. He also points out that when he stutters openly, and I think I've experienced this too, it often encourages other people to let their guard down and explore more intimate and vulnerable topics than you would normally have, to have a more authentic communication through stuttering. Another example of this gain is around talking and writing and the way it gives us new access to words. David Mitchell, a writer who stutters, described his stuttering as a practical course in linguistics. His experience of word swapping brought him a great knowledge of synonyms. You could get it for thesaurus for a brain, and you know what the right word is for the moment, even if you can't sometimes use it. Emma Alpin, a copywriter who stutters, described how her stuttering had given her a great understanding of language. She writes, when I stutter, I'm watching with curiosity the way the way listener reacts, confused for an instance. I'm thinking about how delicate all conversations are, how sensitive to any pause or interruption. Stuttering may give us special insights into language by breaking it open and exposing its seams. Finally, for me personally, the greatest gain from stuttering has been the sense of community and tribe it has brought. I've made many friends through stuttering, and my life would be much less if I had not had the good fortune through stuttering to meet some of these people. And before I finish, I just want to add that I'm not trying to say stuttering is a garden of roses all the time, but that rather there are different ways of thinking about stuttering than simply a taken for granted negative that needs to be fixed. And we can explore these as individuals if we wish to. Here are some resources that people may find beneficial if they wish to explore this area more. Our book has just went live on Kindle in Australia, and there's lots of good free resources I've listed here if people do want to learn more. I wanted to leave you with one final question or thought, and for you to just ponder, which is, what have you gained from stuttering in your life? I really look forward to the questions and thoughts you have for me after this session. Thank you. Goodbye.